Let's talk a bunch of different topics.
How the career get there.
This is a podcast with Lauren Asghari.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for listening. Hit that like button, leave a positive comment, or hit subscribe to get alerted when new episodes drop. All of this will help keep the project going. Thank you for your support and enjoy the episode. This is the Lauren Asghari podcast, How'd Her Career Get There? And my guest today is Louise Blomqvist, who is the EMEA president of Bambuser. She's worked with brands such as Fendi, Dior, Balenciaga, and several more. We'll get into all that. But welcome, Louise.
Thank you so much for having me, Lauren. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
I am really excited about this one because I'm excited to learn about your journey, and the work that you're doing now, I think, is just such an interesting world that I think a lot of people will get value from it. So let's start present day, and then we'll get in our time machine and go backwards. Just give kind of a high level overview about what your day-to-day looks like or what your job is currently.
So today I manage our regional organization through the EMEA, so Europe, Middle East, and we do have some clients in Africa as well. Within this region, we have offices in Stockholm, Paris, London, and also in Finland, where some of our core tech people sit. And on an everyday basis, I sort of go into conversation with my team on what will we tackle here next. We're a startup, still very much startup mentality. So any day could look different from the other. And you sort of have to approach every day with what will move the needle is something that I always carry with me and that I try to coach my team with. Connecting very much with clients, whether it be new prospects or existing clientele, and the teams are new business, so sales team, and customer success, handling all of our existing clients.
And then what's the business of Bambuser?
So we say that we're a video commerce company. It sounds very broad, and the terminology is quite new in the West. Our rise to fame, I'd say, in 2019, 2020 was live shopping, because the company Bambuser has been around since 2007, enabling journalists from politically challenged countries to stream the news. And in 2019, the company pivoted towards live video shopping. And with the pandemic just lingering around the corner, our journey really took off, and we grew some thousands of % on the stock market that year. But we have pivoted into what we now call video commerce, because it's not so much about the live element anymore. While that was very much of essence during COVID, retailers wanted to connect with their audience and their customer groups just like they would if they had walked into store. Today, we know that video is the essence and the medium that an audience or a consumer wants to look at, to receive information, to be educated, to be inspired, whether you are shopping for a new car or a new makeup look. Our clients span anywhere from the industry of beauty, fashion, consumer electronics, but also education, charity, and automotives.
So let's get in our time machine and go back to Louise when she was a little kid growing up, because it's always fascinating to me and to the audience to understand, they hear people doing these interesting things and they think, I want to do that, or I'm interested in doing that. What's a path or an avenue to do that? So tell us a little bit about you for starters. Just basic things, right? Like, where are you from? How many siblings? What were you like as a kid? Let's start there.
So I grew up in a small town on the Swedish west coast called Uddevalla. It has about 50,000 inhabitants, with mom, dad, younger brother, both both parents very hardworking. My dad was a firefighter and my mom was a bookkeeper. I, at a very young age, was drawn to connecting with other people in community. I played handball. That's not something that's very popular in the US. When I later moved there, I was quite mocked for that. But, it's like a football, but with your hands.
I've seen that.
Oh, good. It's quite the popular sport in Europe, but you tell an American it's a little bit foreign for them.
Mm-hmm.
I realized quite early that, I was drawn to community and people, and my sense of business started quite early. Like I remember this the other day, that I would pick flowers from my mom's like rose garden and take the rose petals, drain them in water and make perfume. I think I was like 8 or 9, and then I would try and sell that to our neighbors. There was also a concept of a Christmas catalog. Like you would hand out, as a young kid, you would go door to door around prior to Christmas and hand out this catalog where the prospect customer then would fill out a pamphlet of what they wanted to purchase. And you would then collect that and send it into this organization. And I think I did it 3 years in a row, always winning like the gold prize or something. Like for me, it wasn't so much about what I won. It was about like the actual knocking door to door, asking people what they were interested in, having these sort of conversations, which really transpired later in my career as well. I took up professional dancing when I was 15, 16. And with that, the ballet brought me to New York City. And I, at 18, decided to move there. But prior to that dancing career, I also had a job at 13 at McDonald's, because I don't know if this was a trend in anywhere else, but I mean, it's the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
Miss 60 jeans are super popular in Sweden, very low cut, the Britney Spears era of fashion.
Right.
And they were quite expensive, about $100 or something like that. And for, 13, 14-year-old, that's not really something that is in your monthly allowance. And my dad was like, if you want to buy these jeans, you got to get a job. And I handed in an application to McDonald's. And while I was too young to handle money or any sharp objects, I was allowed to clean the cafeteria, as it was called internally. So I started there and worked super hard throughout nights after school and summer breaks, and just to sort of, the reward of being around people who were driven not only to make money, but to, again, the community of having a mutual goal, creating a great environment together. That very much drove me.
Did you get the jeans?
I got the jeans. I think I had 2 pairs at the
What do you recall from growing up that your parents, either together or individually, taught you traits that carry through to who you are today?
I think the value of $1, if you want something, you have to work hard for it. And it's not so much about the cost of the item, but is it worth its value? So maybe back to the jeans of, it was an Italian make, and there was this fancy, for me back then, item of clothing that I thought carried quality with it. And it's something that I have treasured throughout my life. Like it's not about it. Certain things are expensive, right? But if they deliver value to you, that sort of balances it out.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Let's talk a little bit about So you said a couple of things there, and I kind of want to unpack each one of them. So you come to New York. Talk about the dancing and kind of you came here to do dancing and how that evolved. I don't know if you still do that partially today or not, but how did that evolve to get you where you are currently in your career? And before we get to that, can you also touch on a little bit of coming to America, just immigrating here and kind of what your experience was like?
So I had a wide range of ideas of what I wanted to be when I was as a kid, neither which I think fulfilled my parents. How becoming my then aspiration was to become a professional ballerina, and doing a summer intensive as a 17-year-old on the Broadway Dance Center. I was so intoxicated really by the New York and by the environment that I was in. It became much more than just the dance. And, when you are of a profession like that, you spend so much time in this confined space that is the dance studio. And I realized that there was so much more out there that I wanted to explore and pursue. So I went back to Sweden and finished my last year of high school. And I told my parents that I wanted to move to New York, to which they were like, why would you do that? Education is free in Sweden. Like, why would you go and study in America? Well, you can get a free, really great education here. And I was like, there's something about this thrill, thinking back of it now. What is it? It's almost 20 years ago. How naive I was, but still very driven by a certain goal is something that I can really appreciate and treasure about this young 18-year-old. This was a time, I think Skype had just come out, so I could communicate with my parents, but it was really choppy, and the Wi-Fi internet connection was really tough. I had applied for school at a college called Berkeley in New York City, and I was staying at this girls' center that was set up by my previous dance community, where I was able to rent a room. Coming to America at that point, it was really intoxicating. As far as the people, the environment, I think the American culture of just, I want to say all America, but there is this great talent of the social skill that Americans have that is so inclusive and warm and generous. And so I started college and very quickly cultivated friends. I got a job in a retail store where I was, putting myself through college, paying my rent, and really living this dream that felt completely different than what I had imagined or thought about. But I was just so happy to be a part of this city and the energy. And, New York is sort of its own circus.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're into that, it's so rewarding and fulfilling.
How do you go from coming here, doing dancing, to getting into, I'll call it the corporate world?
Yeah. It's a good question. Sometimes, I don't unpack this story a lot, but whenever I do, people are like, how did you shift? And where did that experience turn into the other? And I think that's also why I'm so excited to speak to you today, because I don't think for a lot of people, there is one path and one line of work that, you work towards a goal, whether it be you're becoming a lawyer or a doctor or an artist of some sort. And for me, it wasn't so clear. And at an early age, I went very much, I know I wanted to work hard. I knew I wanted to dedicate my time for something. In Sweden, during like a lot of my friends, after graduating high school, they would take leap year, go to Thailand and surf for a year, or just work, and then see if they wanted to go to college. I knew that I wanted to continue pursuing a career or of sort, or cultivate my knowledge. So going into study business to be in this New York environment was what I was drawn to. And I met towards the very last year. We were, as a foreigner, you're allowed to work once you have graduated college. America gives you this work permit for a year as a reward for the degree that you have earned in the country. And I had a friend in one of my business classes who had just gotten a job at the Gucci Group. Then Gucci, now they are Kering Group, which was owning then already Alexander McQueen, Stella McCartney, Balenciaga. So she had gotten a job at Balenciaga, and she asked me if I wanted to be her intern. And I was like, that sounds great. I'm into that. And she's like, okay, can you send me your resume? And I was like, yeah, I'll work on that. Didn't really put too much energy or thought into how precious this offer was. And, a lot of back and forth. And finally she was like, but do you really want this? And I was like, oh my God, this is my chance. So I wrote up my resume. I came for an interview, and the internship was mine. And at this point, you didn't get paid for your internships. It was quite difficult getting into corporate America. I remember being very intimidated answering the phone, because it's one thing to have a conversation person to person. I can sort of feel what it is that you're asking me, what you're relaying. But on the phone, it was a completely different sentiment. And again, getting into community with this Balenciaga offices in America at this point, I think we were 8 persons. And within a short amount of time, I was offered a role as a retail planner and analyst, working with the directly owned stores, sort of doing the internal buying, like you select what sort of merchandise should be in the New York store and the LA store. And we were such a great group of people working really hard, being very dedicated to the task. I wasn't such a fashion slave. I could feel like I didn't really understand some of the runways that came on, but I loved the business. Understanding how something would sell in New York based on a particular trend or size or merchandising setup. And again, back to the people, working with the people in the office and also in the stores is really where I cultivated great relationships.
Did that hit you like at the time? Like hearing that, I'm thinking, wow, what an opportunity. Did it hit you at the time, or were you kind of like, all right, this is what people do? Because that's pretty, unique.
No, I don't think I realized it then. We had been encouraged throughout college, go network, go speak to people, go to all of these events. And for me, they didn't drive me very much, like having cold conversations or asking for people's business cards. And also I was super busy working in a retail store trying to balance my cost of living.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that it's so important to care about what you do. It's not about the title or the company or the place, like really being driven by making a difference and connecting that, with what I do today, walking in the door of the office of the morning and what will I do today that will move the needle? Like having that mindset. Same thing when I was a dancer of what do I think will make a difference today? Like I had different goals then, but it was really about feeling the authenticity of what you put into the day, because I can't be the best at everything. I have to realize what it is that drives me and listen to my gut and go with that. Balenciaga for me was so unknown at that time. I came from a small town in Sweden, and purchasing a luxury bag or item of that sort was so foreign. So it was so much more about the job and getting to the goals that the company had set and really being a part of something great. During that time, we opened, there were 2 stores when I started. And when I left 5 years later, there were 12 in the retail network. So it was a business in growth.
What was you said a couple things there I want to touch on a little bit more. What's your perspective on so the internship, one of the internships that you took not paid, what's your perspective on, this is kind of a 2-part question, I'll try to lump them together. Just gaining experience and gaining knowledge, the value of that, paid or unpaid or underpaid. And what advice would you give your younger self?
Well, that's so good. I mean, paid or not paid, it was difficult. You know, I would intern for 3 days and then I would run to this retail store at the end of the day to make a couple of hours or two, because I had to support myself. I mean, my family has supported me throughout this great adventure and journey as well, but I don't think any labor of that sort should be for free. I think that if we want to coach young individuals, learn them the value of putting in the effort, and I think there was frustration within like this army. There were many of us that were interns. I was so fortunate to get hired also as a foreigner. Balenciaga at that time had an Italian American president and CEO, and I think that we struck up a connection, and he saw how hard I worked, but it wasn't that I worked harder than anyone else. At the end of the day, it's again about the community and the connections that you make, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, what was the second question?
Just what advice would you give, and it can be related to that or unrelated, what advice would you give your younger self?
The advice is figure out what you're good at, because you're never gonna be great at everything. And that goes from school to your professional life. Trying to be the best at everything or copying what someone else is doing or is really doing your life worth a disservice. It doesn't say that everything that I do in a day is something that fulfills me or drives me. I have, a percentage part of my job and role that is less favorable than the other.
Right.
But figure out what it is that you're good at and what drives you, because doing more of that will cultivate the great energy. And I honestly think that was the, like, feeling, success is so, it's subject to the person, right? But looking back at this time, I do feel a sense of success because I was so driven about being a part of this group of people and the mission that we were on to build out this brand and retail network that made me feel successful. And advice on, what you could watch out for or be on the lookout for. I just think that whatever wasn't a lesson was homework. Things are going to go wrong. You're going to, especially as an intern, you're going to end up sending a report email to the wrong client or the wrong buyer, and all of these mistakes are great learnings. And it's the same thing now, 20 years later, that, whatever mistake I make, whether I be showered with shame at the end of the day, what lesson did I gain from this? Or what was the homework? What is something that I need to work on? Is it slowing down? Is it understanding the task better? Really advice on connecting to yourself and what you want to do, and try to spend time cultivating that talent so that you can get more energized spearheading into that.
Do you feel like you had, excuse me, you feel like you had mentors or advocates throughout your career? And if so, or if not, how important was or wasn't that?
I've had different coaches and mentors throughout my career. I think the most significant one was prior to my corporate career in this boutique that I worked for an Israeli woman named Anat. She coached me in being different. Like, she would always tell me, keep being different, relate to people, and keep innovating your ideas. And
I love that.
why, like, yeah, for me, that really hits deep, and it's something that I try to relate to young individuals that I work with as well. And a little bit to my point earlier, it's not because you can copy somebody else's success. I've had mentors who are successful CEOs and have made exits, but her sentiment of, be different, don't be like anyone else. Back to my intern days, there was a manager at Balenciaga at that time who told me, you are an intern. You shouldn't be speaking to the CEO or the managers. And I was like, but why? We're all people. Like, I didn't really understand. For me, it was a foreign, this whole hierarchy. And I walked into the kitchen and there is this president CEO. And I was like, but he's a person and I'm a person. And, everybody's, again, back to community and cultivating connections. And I think not sticking to those rules of, you're lesser than and such is better than has been a part of has given me the great opportunity of growing this career. So being different, relating to other people, and keep innovating throughout. What are you great at? That has been the key of my career and life, I'd say.
Well, and I think that's, you said several things there, which I think are fantastic advice, guidance, perspective. But I love at the end of the day, we're all people, right? And, I always think of, like, when talking with people, just at the very base level, we're all humans, right? So, like, starting there and the relatability piece, which, you've obviously, like, had even since a very young age. But starting there and kind of letting that kind of deflate the intimidation and thinking, like, okay, that, CEO was an intern at some point or was in somebody else's seat at some point. So I think quite often people get a little bit more intimidated by others instead of realizing most of the time those people are also empathetic to the fact that they were in the person that's talking to them shoes at one point. So I love that you said that.
You're so right. I try and think of that today as well. Because, even though I carry this title today, Lauren, in your previous podcast, said something so profound, I think, about my title is rented, but who I am is, what was it that she said? Because
I know what you're talking about. I can't remember the exact thing, but yeah, like, who I am is permanent, or who I am is
because that's the thing. It's like, you are not your title. I have, she said it. Oh, it was so beautiful. So I have rented this title for now, but it's not who I am. And still to this day, going in and negotiating with the C-suite of LVMH, of course, I sense intimidation. I try and prepare the best I can. And there are some nerves involved as well, but always thinking about that behind whatever you do, behind this screen too, you and I having this conversation, we're all people. And people do business with people they like, and whoever they can relate to, that's where you cultivate that connection for great business.
Well, and to that point, I have two more questions for you, and then we'll get to rapid fire. But kind of pulling the string on that thread a little bit, have you had the challenges of separating or finding your value as a person through your work? Like, have you associated? I think something just in talking with people, whether I'm getting messages about this podcast or just out there talking with friends of mine or people that are male or female, but the disassociation between work is such an important part of what they do, but not seeing it as their full value as a person. Can you pull on that thread a little bit? How do you view that, or how have you historically viewed that?
Absolutely. So I left Balenciaga after 5 years and went to another local New York fashion brand. And after 2 years, I was laid off. I was reaching almost 10 years in living in New York City, and I was quite ready to move back to Sweden. And I had a conversation with that employer and, what would be the best timing for you to leave. And it ended up me, how do you say this in English? They,
We'll say in Swedish. We'll learn something new.
I came into to a conference room one day, like I'd just been at Saks Fifth Avenue doing merchandising and collection trainings, and they're, your position has been eliminated. That's the word I was looking for. And for someone who has taken a lot of pride in, who I like, the effort, the energy, the everything I put into my work, that was such a moment of shame and disbelief, not understanding. And I think, in the end, it was sort of controlling of when I was going to exit the company, and fashion works within, seasonal cycles and stuff. But it was done to me. And then how old am I? 27, 26. So for me, it was done in such a inhumane way. But it had at that point and previous to, I felt such connection to what I did. I can really speak for my Balenciaga time that I felt like I am Louise, buyer at Balenciaga. And that, experience at the next employer was it took me a good year or a little bit more than that to get over how I felt that a part of my identity had been ripped from me. And that's when I really started working on, it's not what I am, it's what I do. And I think that is so important, speaking about work and identity today. And, what are you good at? Because while we spend so much time at work and we identify with these positions, being the president of a regional organization today is the largest position that I've held. And I do it with such pride for this time, because it's rented. I do the best with what I have and with the time that we have here and now. But this is my job. It's not what I do. So whenever I present myself, I say I work as president of EMEA, but it's not who I am. And I think that is super important, separating who you are from your career and what you do. Because, look at me. I thought I was going to be a ballerina or a handball player, and now I work as a president of an organization. So it keeps evolving and it keeps changing. So while some people identify really strongly with what they do, it can really be a good service to yourself to know who you are beyond work.
I love that. And I love the through line, since you were a little kid, making perfume, is work ethic and understanding of value. So it's interesting just talking to you, and there's many more facets, obviously, to your personality and who you are. But when I look at that from a career perspective, it's not whether it's dancing or in your current job, it's the through line is value and work and understanding those things and how they coincide in people and relationships. So it's interesting just putting equating it to that versus, to your point, the job titles. So
right.
I have one more question for you, then we'll get to rapid fire. Before I get to that, is there anything that you want to cover or talk about that we haven't discussed?
I just want, since we're talking about, I got into the whole identity of career, and I think what has been really big for me today in the job that I do, being a part of a female-led organization with 70% of having 70% of women in leadership. Coming back to what I was saying earlier about community and connection, we are a tech startup, and it's a heavily dominated male industry. So creating this community of really strong and experienced women, whether it be, you see my background, it's so scattered across the place, but we all contribute something. And I think that women being very communal in our way of working is what makes my current company such a great organization to work for and being in connection with. So just for any listeners out there, we are, the company was founded in freedom of speech and connection. And I think that's something, even though we have pivoted into this video sentiment and video commerce, is something that stays very true to the organization, which is unique in its own.
That is now you sparked something that made me ask one more question. Then I'll get to my final question. From a leader,
I'm going to talk to you.
From a leadership perspective, what has been your experience, or what perspective do you have for people that are in leadership roles? And I think, I don't know if this is a controversial statement or not. I feel like it's just true. I feel like there is a difference being a female leader versus a male leader in terms of how you're perceived. Independent of that, what has just been your experience, leadership style? What guidance do you have for leaders or advice? What's worked well for you? What have you done that you're like, oh gosh, that was a bad idea, in terms of motivating people or anything?
Yeah, it's hard. I think just like, I was going to say raising kids, and it's not at all where I want to go, but it's, it changes every day, like your leadership style. Becoming a manager early in my career in New York, managing people, it was a realization of all of a sudden I'm the one who makes the decision. Sounds wrong, but some days you point with your whole hand and your whole arm. And it's
you have the accountability. You have the end accountability.
Thank you. Yeah, indeed. And it's a muscle that, and I think in the beginning years, I thought that either I have it or I don't. I felt very strongly that it's a talent or an aspect of, my career that I wanted to possess. I wanted to be this team lead because I have I speak with authority and conviction, and even in instances where it's not a matter of me to call the shots or to make decisions like privately, it's just a role that I'm very comfortable in. But it's not so much about being good or bad. It's a lot of traits is a muscle, that you have to flex and you have to work on. And I think as a business leader today, I'm still working on it. Like, I'm still figuring things out. Every individual has different drive or different aspects of business that they are motivated by, and sometimes it's challenging when I think about, your care is different from my care, right? Because your perception and thought behind a specific action point is different than mine. So flexing the muscle of being patient and understanding, and really taking the time to understand where someone else is coming from. And I think as women in the workforce, might be controversial, but I'm just going to say that we're hella good at it. We build community and connection within
our sister.
That's right. And I'm so proud to be part of Bambuser today, having so many women in leadership and a part of the organization as a whole, because our way of approaching business and connection with clients and community is different, and it's so needed. And while there are challenges of being a woman out there, I think that there is actually an expectation on. I was reading, it was actually this summer, I was so late on a couple of books, and Sheryl Sandberg has that book, Lean In.
Mm-hmm.
She was talking about the expectation on women in the workforce on you can't negotiate like a man. You can't demand things like a man, because if you do, you're perceived hard and direct and sort of a B.
Mm-hmm.
Easy. Yeah. You know? And that's challenging sometimes, because sometimes you have to make decisions just to move quick. But I think keeping that in mind of what is expected of us as women and building community, flex that muscle of understanding and connecting with individuals on your team. Because while we may see a challenge differently, there are usually several solutions to a problem.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I always look at it and try to focus on, and even when communicating with people, intent. Like, what's the intent behind what they're doing? And even if it comes out of their mouth wrong of how they said it, or sometimes when I'm communicating to people, if it comes out too direct or too brusque or whatever, the intent behind what I'm doing, I hope people like give a little bit of grace. That's how I kind of like to do it with others as well. So I agree. All right, my last question before we get to rapid fire: how do you define success?
It's how you feel at the end of the day. When you close the door behind you, do you feel happy and content with who you are? That is success above anything else. If you're happy about what it is that you do and what you perform, there is no releasing time or aspect of life. I've held several titles in my career at this point, and just like you're graduating high school, you think that is going to release you. You come to college and you're like, oh, now I'm in my third year, thinking that the break point is gonna, or the release is gonna keep coming. It's never gonna come. It's all about being content with what you do and who you are, and it's an everyday.
You nailed it. I wish somebody would have told me that when I was way younger. Of it's not like you hit something and then it's like, okay, this is done now. It's like you're just constantly evolving and growing. Like we're all just kind of big children.
Yeah, figuring it out, right? There was no guide. There was nothing.
Mm-hmm. Which I love personally. I think that's part of the beauty of life. So
it is.
All right, we're going to get to rapid fire, totally unrelated to anything that we talked about, just whatever's off the top of your head. I think this is maybe 6 questions. Apple or Android?
Apple.
Stone or brick?
Stone.
Hot or cold?
Hot.
East Coast, West Coast?
East Coast.
Beach or mountains?
Beach.
And the last one, astronaut or deep sea diver?
Astronaut.
Right. I like it. This has been such a pleasure. I feel like I could just sit and have coffee with you and talk for hours. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much. Me too. This was lovely, Lauren. Thank you so much for having me. Such an honor.
Absolutely. This is the Lauren Asghari podcast, How'd Her Career Get There? And we will see you next time.
Let's talk a bunch of different topics.
How'd her career get there?
This is a podcast with Lauren Asghari.